Jessica was 17 years old. She was part of a large group of friends in a small town on the outskirts of Chicago. There was always a cheerful, but sometimes toxic atmosphere in this company. One of the main problem participants was Tyler, a 23-year-old boy with an overly sharp tongue and a constant desire to dominate. He never hid his irritation with Jessica and every time found a new way to humiliate her. "Seriously, Jess, do you at least sometimes think before you say something?" he sneered at the next party, causing laughter from those present. "You're just jealous that I'm smarter than you," she nodded, not wanting to give him pleasure. These skirmishes lasted for more than 1 month. Tyler seemed to be deliberately looking for her presence, but only to hook up again. Jessica was angry with him, but she didn't understand why he always chose her target. One autumn evening, they gathered again with a friend in the backyard. It was cool, the air smelled of fire smoke, and music was heard from a small column. Tyler was sitting in the spotlight again, joking and throwing prickly replies. Jessica tried to ignore him, but this time he decided to act differently. "Do you know what, Jess?" Tyler suddenly blurted out, making everyone shut up. "I'm tired. Either we meet or I don't see you here again." Jessica froze in place. Her eyes opened wide, and her heart began to beat faster. Everyone looked at her, then at him. "Is this a joke? Are you serious?" she finally said. "Like never before," Tyler replied, hiding his hands in his pockets and staring into her eyes. "I'll think about it," she replied coldly, raising her chin. There was anger on Tyler's face, mixed with confusion. He didn't expect that. He was sure that Jessica would either agree immediately, or at least be offended. But her indifferent tone knocked him out of balance. "You just can't admit that you like me," he said caustically, trying to regain control of the situation. "You always play these stupid games." "And who was playing here?" Jessica replied calmly, looking directly into his eyes. "You hated me, insulted me, and now you decided that I should only agree because you said so?" Tyler looked at her silently. He felt that for the first time in his life someone had revealed him. All his insults, all his senseless attacks were just an attempt to get her attention, but now he realized that he had gone too far. "I'll let you know what I decide," Jessica added and turned to her friends, leaving Tyler standing alone by the fire. It was the first time he felt small and vulnerable. But maybe that's what he needed to finally get older. After that awkward conversation by the fire, Jessica still agreed to give Tyler a chance. She herself did not understand why she decided so, either because of curiosity, or because she wanted to know what he really was. To her surprise, Tyler changed. That self-confident and prickly guy disappeared somewhere, giving way to an attentive and caring boy. He wrote to her every morning good afternoon, and called before going to bed to wish her good night. Tyler began to take her for walks, gave her coffee in his favorite cafe, and listened attentively as she shared her thoughts or experiences. "I didn't know you could be like that," Jessica once said as they sat on a bench in the park. "Maybe I was just an idiot before," he replied with a smile. However, there was a nuance that bothered them. Tyler lived in a neighboring town, 80 kilometers from Jessica. To see her, he had to get up earlier every day and return home late at night. It exhausted him, but he didn't want distance to be an obstacle. "Are you really not difficult?" Jessica asked every time he appeared on the doorstep of her house, with a smile and a warm drink for her. "It's worth someone who wants to see," Tyler joked, although sometimes his eyes gave out fatigue. They were together for 6 months. It was a time of happiness and romance, trips together to the lake, evenings at the cinema, and many funny moments when they walked the streets of the city. But gradually the distance began to take its toll. Tyler was on the verge, he couldn't stand the constant moves, and admitted that he was tired of the road. One day he decided to act. "I can't live like this anymore," Tyler said during their date. "What?" Jessica froze, because she didn't know what he was leaning at. "I rent an apartment here in your city. I have already found an option. I will sign the contract tomorrow." Are you serious? Her voice soared an octave higher. Uh-huh, he nodded and smiled. I don't want to see you once every few days. Now I'll be there, whether you like it or not. Jessica laughed, but tears of happiness shone in her eyes. She couldn't believe that Tyler was ready for such a step. The following week he moved into a new apartment. Now they could see each other every day, and this made their relationship even stronger. Tyler continued to surprise her with his attention and care, and Jessica realized that behind his prickly appearance was a guy capable of great deeds. After 3 months of living together, Jessica began to notice that Tyler had changed. At first, these were minor misunderstandings. He often returned home in a bad mood, could respond sharply or be silent for hours. Jessica thought it was work stress or ordinary fatigue, so she tried to support him as much as she could. Is everything okay? She asked every time he came gloomy. Hunk, Jess, he said, without even looking at her. Over time, the situation only got worse. Tyler began to rush at her because of every little thing, unwashed dishes, questions about his affairs, even because she had been on the phone for too long. His voice became sharp and loud, and sometimes Jessica saw him clenching his fists, as if he was barely holding himself back. I'm tired of all this, he once shouted when she tried to talk about what was going on. Do you think it's that simple? Do I have to entertain you all the time? Jessica was silent, swallowing tears. She did not recognize Tyler, the same guy who a few months ago was gentle, attentive, and ready to go to the end of the world for her. She loved him and believed that it was just a difficult period that they would go through together. But the quarrels became tougher. Tyler shouted, slammed the door, could break a plate or throw something against the wall. One day he grabbed her hand so much that he left bruises. Jessica was scared, but didn't leave. He's not always like that, she whispered to herself, sitting in the kitchen late at night. Just hard times. He will change. She tried to justify him to herself and her friends, who noticed that she had become closed and sad. But deep down, she understood, it's not just a crisis, it's something more. Tyler changed, and this new Tyler scared her. One day, after another fight, when he shouted so that the neighbors were knocking on the wall, Jessica sat on the bed and looked into the void for a long time. She didn't cry anymore. She realized that love is not pain or fear. And if she stays, she will break herself completely. The next morning, she packed up and left without saying a word. The next morning, Jessica's phone was bursting with calls. Tyler called over and over again, leaving voice messages full of supplication and repentance. Jess, please come back. I was an idiot, his broken voice sounded in the handset. I won't be like that anymore. I swear to you. Just give me another chance. Jessica sat on the park bench with tears in her eyes, clutching the phone in her hands. She loved him despite the pain he caused. Her heart was drawn back, even when her mind begged her not to make this mistake. He will change, she whispered to herself, pressing the call button. She returned to his apartment in the evening. Tyler greeted her with flowers and a tearful face. He hugged her so tightly, as if he was afraid that she would leave again. I promise, everything will be different. I will work on myself, he repeated, and his words sounded so sincere that Jessica believed him again. But nothing has changed. A few weeks passed, and everything returned to its place. Tyler again began to break down because of the little things. Do you even know how to do anything? He shouted when she accidentally forgot to turn off the bathroom lights. Why do you always find a reason to quarrel? Jessica cried. If you don't like something, the door is over there, he squirmed, pointing to the exit with his hand. This is not the first time this has happened. Tyler increasingly kicked her out of the house after another quarrel. Jessica sometimes left, but came back every time he called the next day with apology and tears. I'm just losing control, he said as she came back. You know how much I love you. But love didn't have to look like that. The sparkle disappeared in her eyes, and the smile became a rarity. Jessica felt trapped. She loved Tyler and believed that he could change, but every day she realized that she was destroying herself. One evening, when he screamed again and threw her bag on the threshold, Jessica stood at the door and looked at him silently. "Well, go," he exclaimed, waving his hand angrily. That evening, Jessica walked down the dark street without looking back. She could feel the cold wind seaming her to her bones, but the pain in her soul was much stronger. She thought about everything that happened between them, about the love that once seemed like a fairy tale, and about the cruelty that destroyed her. At home, she called her friend Lori. "I can't do it anymore," Jessica whispered into the phone, trying to hide her tears. "I'll come to you," Lori immediately replied. That evening, Lori didn't let her be alone with her thoughts. She forced Jessica to tell everything she had kept in herself for the past months, about screaming, about threats, about how Tyler kicked her out of the house and every time begged her to come back. "Why have you put up with it for so long?" Lori asked softly, looking into her eyes. "Because I loved him," Jessica replied, barely holding back a new wave of tears. "It's not love, Jess. Love doesn't hurt, it doesn't make you afraid. You deserve more." Lori's words were stuck in her head. For the first time in a long time, Jessica thought about herself. About the fact that she was once strong, cheerful, and dreamed of a great future. Now she felt as if she had lost herself in Tyler's shadow. The next morning, she received another call from him. The phone was ringing in her hands, but this time she didn't answer. Then came the messages. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to. I need you, Jess. I'll change, I swear." She knew the script. I knew too well. And for the first time she didn't want to believe it. She blocked his number and put the phone aside. A few days have passed. Jessica started spending time with her friends again, talking more with Lori, and finally starting to remember who she is. It was hard at first. She was still thinking about Tyler, about those moments when he was kind and caring. But each such thought pushed her to memories of tears, fear, and his cries. Tyler came to her house several times, but she didn't open the door. His abusive words, which used to hurt her so deeply, now no longer had power over her. She realized that loving someone doesn't mean allowing yourself to be destroyed. A few weeks later, Jessica got a new job and began to study what she was always interested in, photography. She found the strength to build a life that no longer depended on anyone else. One day, while walking through the park with a camera in her hands, she met Lori. The friend smiled, looking at Jessica, who seemed to glow from the inside again. "Are you happy?" Lori asked. Jessica looked at her and nodded confidently. "Yes. For the first time in a long time, it's true." One day, when Jessica had already begun to regain her former life, the phone rang again. The number was hidden, but she knew who it was. Her heart withered, and her fingers reached for the answer button by themselves. "Hi, Jess," a familiar voice said softly. There was no previous aggression in it, only fatigue and despair. "What do you want, Tyler?" Her voice was calm, but something staggered inside. "I know what I've done," he said slowly, as if he was afraid to scare her. "I ruined everything, but I can't do without you. I have changed. You will see. Give me one last chance." Jessica was silent, looking out the window at the gray weather. She remembered everything, how he screamed, how he chased her out, how she cried at night. But somewhere deep in the shower there was still something to him. Love, pity, and maybe hope that he can really change. "I don't know, Tyler," she whispered. "Please," his voice broke. "I'll do whatever I want. I even started going to a psychologist. Just come back." The next day she met him at the coffee shop. Tyler looked different, tired but calm. He held a cup of coffee in his hands and looked at her almost with awe. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he said. "But I swear I'll get better." I realized that I would lose you completely if I didn't change." Jessica wanted to believe. She needed this faith because she still loved him, even after everything. After a week of hesitation and talking to Lori, she agreed to try again. "Just promise me it will be different this time," she told him as they stood at the door of his apartment. "I promise," Tyler replied and kissed her on the forehead. The first few weeks everything was fine. Tyler was attentive and caring, like at the beginning of their relationship. He brought her breakfast in bed, joked when she was sad, and constantly said how much he loved her. "You've changed," Jessica once whispered, leaning against him on the couch. "Just for you," he replied with a smile. But over time, the old habits began to return. At first they were small things: increased tone of voice, when something was wrong, sharp answers. Then everything became more serious. One evening, he broke again because dinner was cold. "You can't do anything at all," he shouted, throwing the plate to the floor. Jessica froze in place, looking at the broken dishes. My heart tightened in my chest. She didn't cry anymore, there were no tears left. "You promised," she said softly. "So what?" he replied rudely. "You bring me to this yourself." That evening, Jessica was sitting on the edge of the bed again, looking into the darkness. She realized that the circle was repeating itself, and Tyler would not change, no matter how much he promised. Only this time did she know that it was not her fault. She realized that love is not promises to change. And love should not cause pain. The next morning, she silently packed her things and left the apartment. Tyler was standing on the doorstep, already realizing that she was leaving forever. "Jess, please." His voice was weak. "Goodbye, Tyler," she replied firmly and for the first time in a long time smiled to herself. She didn't look back this time. It's been a few months since Jessica left Tyler for good. At first it was not easy, she felt empty, as if she had lost something important. But every day she felt like she was coming back to life again. Jessica no longer felt fear or anxiety. She began to take up herself, again took up the photography she loved so much, got a job in a local photo salon, and even signed up for courses. One day she was standing in the park with a camera in her hands, filming nature, when a guy approached her with a friendly smile. "Are you a professional or an amateur?" he asked, looking at her pictures. "Something in between," she replied with a smile. It was a simple conversation, but she felt her heart beat in a new way for the first time in a long time. The boy's name was Alex, and he didn't look like Tyler at all. He was attentive, calm, and never tried to humiliate or control her. Over time, they began to communicate more and more, and Jessica realized for the first time what true healthy love is, without pain and fear. Meanwhile, Tyler also went his way. After Jessica left, he fell into a deep lonely state, realizing that he had lost a girl who truly loved him. He had to face his demons. At the insistence of a friend, he began to visit a psychotherapist, where he first opened up about his childhood traumas, anger, and inability to control emotions. "You can't change the past," the psychologist told him. "But you can change your future if you work on yourself." Tyler listened, and for the first time really tried to understand why he treated those he loved like this. It was a long and difficult road, but it didn't give up. Gradually, Tyler became calmer, more conscious, and mature. He found a new job, started playing sports, and even signed up for volunteer projects. One day he was sitting in a coffee shop and saw a couple in love at the next table. He smiled, remembering Jessica. There was no more anger or regret in his heart, only gratitude for helping him realize that he had to change. Jessica and Tyler never saw each other again. Their lives went their separate ways, but they both found their happiness. Jessica continued to develop her career as a photographer, and Alex became her support. Tyler met a girl with whom he was sincere and kind, because he learned to be better. They both learned the main thing: true love is not pain or fear. It is support, respect, and desire to grow together. And although their paths parted, each of them became happy in their own way. Years passed. Jessica and Tyler's lives were filled with new events, achievements, and people. Jessica devoted herself entirely to photography and became famous in her city. Her photos appeared at exhibitions, in magazines, and even on the covers of popular publications. She didn't even notice how her hobby became a life's work that brought not only joy, but also success. Alex supported her in everything. They traveled a lot, and he was always there, patient, loving, and loyal. "I always knew you could achieve anything you wanted," Alex once said as they stood on the balcony of a hotel in Paris, watching the sunset. Jessica smiled and leaned against him. She was happy and felt that she had finally found her place in the world. As for Tyler, his life has also gone. Therapy helped him understand himself and learn to control his emotions. He found a job that really gave him pleasure and took up coaching for teenagers who had problems with anger like he once did. Once on the sports ground, after training, one of the guys approached him. "Coach, how did you become so calm?" asked the teenager. "You always say the right things." Tyler smiled. "You see, it's important in life to learn from your mistakes. The main thing is not to be afraid to change and become better." That evening he returned home with a sense of calm. He learned to accept his past without blaming anyone, and began to build a healthy relationship with a new girl who saw in him a person who was ready to grow and truly love. A few years later, fate accidentally brought Jessica and Tyler together again. This happened at a charity event where Jessica was a photographer and Tyler acted as a coach and mentor. They noticed each other from afar. At first, there was silence between them, but then Tyler came to her and smiled. "Hi, Jess," he said softly. "You look great." "And you too, Tyler," she replied, noticing how his eyes had changed. They were calmer and kinder. "I'm glad you're happy," he added. "I'm happy for you too." It was a short but important farewell. Both realized that their paths parted for a reason. They have changed and matured thanks to the mistakes that once almost broke them. Jessica returned to Alex and Tyler to her new girlfriend, knowing that now they have both learned to value life, respect, and love. A few more years have passed. Life moved forward, changing people and the circumstances around them. Jessica continued to develop her career in the world of photography. Her works have received international recognition, and her name has become known in art circles. She not only photographed for major publications, but also arranged her exhibitions in New York, London, and other capitals of the world. Alex was always there, supporting her in everything. Their relationship became a solid foundation on which they built a life together. Alex proposed to her during a trip to Italy, where they strolled through the ancient streets of Florence. "Jess, you are my inspiration, my support, and my best friend." "Say me," he said, kneeling down. "Yes," she replied with tears of happiness in her eyes. Their wedding was simple but beautiful. In a small circle of close friends and family, they swore allegiance, knowing that together they could overcome everything. Soon they became parents. They had a daughter, whom they named Emily. Jessica often photographed her little family, and there was so much love and warmth in her footage that it didn't need words. Tyler also found his place in life. His work as a coach and mentor turned into a vocation. He opened a center for teenagers with difficult life circumstances, helping them find a way out of the anger and pain he once felt himself. His story inspired others. He did not hide his mistakes, but showed that you can always change and become a better version of yourself. Later, he met a woman named Sarah, a kind and wise girl who accepted him as he is and supported him in his desire to help others. Sarah became his support, and together they created a quiet and happy life. One day, returning home after another meeting with his pupils, Tyler stopped for a moment and looked at the sunset. At this moment, he thought about the past, about his mistakes, about Jessica, about the path he had to go. He no longer felt pain or regret. Only gratitude for the fact that life gave him a chance to change. Fate brought them together again, many years later, when they met by chance at a charity auction in Chicago. Jessica brought her daughter Emily to the West, and Tyler came with Sarah. They looked at each other in the crowd and smiled at each other. "Are you happy?" Tyler asked softly, walking up to Jessica. "So," she replied, looking at her family who was standing next to her. "And you?" "Also," he nodded. They didn't say anything else. And it wasn't necessary. It was a moment of calm when both realized that the past was left behind, and their lives were exactly as they should have.